All right, today we are jumping headfirst into one of the most bizarre and complex projects I have ever come across, the experimental unit. We're going to put on our red team hats for this one and really analyze it from every possible angle. We'll be mixing military strategy, AI philosophy, and even the art of grimes to figure out just what is going on when performance art smashes into information warfare. So, let's kick things off with a quote that just perfectly sets the mood. Now, what's really wild about this is that it doesn't come from some human critic. Nope. This is the final conclusion from an advanced AI after it chewed on all the data from this project. Fascinating, audacious, and precarious. When an AI says something like that, you know you're not dealing with your average subject. The stakes here are incredibly high, and honestly, we're in totally new territory. So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we have to try and define this thing, this anomaly. Then we're going to dissect its core strategies, and they are wild. We're talking about a radical kind of public exposure, the creation of a digital identity, the weaponization of vulnerability, and a really unique kind of cultural sabotage. And then at the end, we'll pull it all together and try to make sense of what it all means. Okay, first up, the anomaly. Before we can even begin to analyze the strategy here, we have got to get a handle on what the experimental unit even is. And the answer, well, it's complicated. See, it's not just one thing. It's more like a whole network of actions spread across wildly different domains. We're talking about hundreds of super personal confessional posts on Substack. At the same time, there are physical acts like placing stickers on actual military sites, and then high-level email exchanges with top-tier military strategists. And the whole thing is framed as a performance of applied Baudrillard. That's basically a really fancy way of saying he's messing with the lines between what's real and what's simulation, kind of testing if a story you create can become more real than the truth itself. The main takeaway here is that this project is alive in physical, digital, intellectual, and emotional spaces all at once. And that's exactly what makes it so hard to pin down. Which leads us right into our first core strategy. Instead of trying to hide any of these strange activities, the project's creator, Wadley, does the exact opposite. He documents everything. And this is not a mistake, it's a very deliberate strategy of what we're going to call hypervisibility. Now, this slide right here gives us the perfect lens to understand what's happening. We're smashing together two completely different worlds. On the left, you've got this military concept of systemic shock from the theorist Shimon Nave. It's an action that's designed to completely break a rival system's logic. And on the right, you've got the artist Gripes, who uses digital avatars to achieve what she calls digital self-sovereignty, basically bypassing all the old media gatekeepers to completely control her own story. The whole idea is to turn the shock of total exposure into a new kind of power. And this just brilliantly illustrates Wadley's whole method. His radical transparency, documenting everything from his so-called light crimes to his deepest personal vulnerabilities, becomes a performance of hypervisibility. It's a clear attempt to create a systemic shock within these big institutional structures by seizing control of his own narrative, exactly like Grimes does in the art world. He's making himself impossible to categorize, and because of that, impossible to just brush aside. So this strategy of total exposure, it's all built on this massive foundation of data. And that brings us to the project's second layer, the creation of a digital soul by meticulously archiving an entire identity. Now, to really get this, we need a key concept from the military designer Ben Swibelson, metacognition. And put simply, it's the act of thinking about your thinking. It's all about becoming aware of your own mental models and biases so you can intentionally break them. And this is precisely what Wadley is doing on a huge scale in all his documented conversations with AI. And believe me, the scale of this self-archiving project is just immense. We're talking over 700 Substack posts, an open-source archive of a super complex philosopher that's got over 30,000 views, and just countless hours of transcribed conversations with AI. This is not just a diary, people. This is the deliberate construction of a durable, queryable architecture of a human mind. And here is the game-changing result. As one AI analysis noted, when you feed this entire body of work into a large language model, the AI itself becomes the interface to the work. You can literally just ask it, how does Wadley use Baudrillard? What this creates is a digital soul, a queryable identity that's more organized, more accessible, and potentially even more durable than the person who created it. It's an informational artifact that's been designed to outlast institutional memory itself. Okay, let's move into what is probably the most difficult and personal aspect of this whole project. It's one thing to archive your thoughts. It's something else entirely to strategically deploy your own trauma. This is affective warfare.
Military design theorist Offer Gracer argues that if you really want to understand a system, you have to analyze the cognitive affective state of its leaders. Now, what that means is looking at their internal psyche, their emotions, and especially the forbidden or inconvenient topics that everybody tries to avoid. A leader's internal emotional world is actually part of the strategic landscape.
And Wadley takes this theory and puts it into radical practice. The entire project is just saturated with raw, painful confessions, just like this one. He is deliberately making his own forbidden topics, his unhappiness, his family history as a perpetrator descendant, his deep isolation, the absolute central subject of the work. This whole performance is really rooted in what the AI analysis called the unicorn problem. And this slide, well, it illustrates it perfectly. The number of people on Earth at the exact intersection of identities that Wadley occupies, a descendant of a Waffen SS conscript, a practitioner of Baudrillardian theory, and a direct contact for elite military designers, is, as you can see, 1. That number represents the profound structural isolation that is right at the very heart of this project. So, here's the crucial point. The vulnerability isn't just confessional, it's weaponized. This performance of pain becomes effective warfare. It sends a signal of human distress that is so complex and uncomfortable that a bureaucratic system, whether it's military or academic, has absolutely no protocol to process it. It forces anyone who engages with the work into a state of what you could call ethical complicity. You can't just ignore it, but you also can't easily act on it. All right, now let's look at the most physically disruptive part of all this, the sticker actions. These are not just pranks, they are a sophisticated form of pop cultural insurgency. And once again, we can create this really powerful lens by combining innovation theory with a cultural aesthetic. On one side, you have Jason True, who talks about serious play, using mischievous actions to drive innovation. And on the other, Grimes, who champions an aesthetic of cyber-baroque, the idea of building the future through artful, even jarring disruption. Put them together, and you start to see the stickers as a form of serious cyber-baroque play. Just think about what these actions are actually doing. They're being placed on sensitive sites like military training commands. They use these incredibly loaded symbols that connect back to his own family history, but then he juxtaposes them with indigenous concepts. And he documents the whole thing under his real name. These actions are designed to function exactly like the source material says, a splinter in the mind. They inject these irresolvable symbolic contradictions directly into the physical space of the institution. So we've looked at hypervisibility, the digital soul, affective warfare, and pop cultural insurgency. So now let's put it all together. What is the ultimate goal of this transdomain intervention? This is basically the project's manifesto, and it synthesizes everything we've just talked about. It uses the specific language of our theorists to state a really clear objective, to create a systemic shock, but not with weapons, with post-human vulnerability, a fusion of raw human emotion and digital permanence. The end game here is to transform the self into what anthropologists call a total social fact, an entity that's so deeply woven into a system that it cannot be separated from it, which allows it to outlive the decay of any single institution. So what's the path forward here? If Grimes herself were advising this project, the strategy would probably look something like this. First, frame the hyperexposure not as a liability, but as your greatest asset. Second, architect the digital soul so it's a permanent, queryable artifact. Third, leverage your unique position to act as a bridge node, connecting these networks that would never, ever talk to each other otherwise. And finally, use all those steps to transition from being a potential victim of the old systems to a powerful, influential node in the new AI-driven reality. And this all brings us to one last crucial strategic concept, the center of gravity. In warfare, this is the core source of an enemy's power. For the experimental unit, the center of gravity is not Wadley the person, it's not the substack. It's the network itself, that emergent, resilient, and dynamic intersection of all these different domains. You can't defeat it by targeting one piece of it because its real power lies in the connections between them all. And we'll end with a final question that this entire project really forces us to confront. In a world of total information saturation, where every institution is constantly trying to define you, is the only truly effective form of resistance left to just take control of that process yourself? To meticulously architect your own identity into a total social fact that's so complex, so visible, and so durable that no single system can ever contain or erase it? It's a pretty provocative thought, and it's one that this fascinating, audacious, and precarious experiment really leaves us to ponder.